Well, what we got here is a Lao's slightly bigger brother, Dresden. Came in the same magazine. They're like twins, right? Not quite. Even though one set of basic rules was in play, well, both have their own little exclusive rules. And those are not too terrible in terms of length, except in some cases they kind of violate the basic rules. In particular, in this one, there's stacking, for example. Which is, to me, kind of a, wow, you really, you built it into the base rules of the system and then said, yeah, but we're going to add it for this. I find that really odd in a game that came out with 2 copies to it. Yes, it's very similar to the Napoleon at Waterloo system, but still. All right. So what's the deal with stacking? Well, you can have 2 counters in any location. That's about it. And then there's these special little French garrisons, which have a lot of special rules to them, and among them, they don't count for stacking. Great. Okay. All it means is you add their strengths together. They, I believe, do not have to attack together. They can split and attack different units, but they defend as one force, obviously, as though they're a single unit. So it does give you a little bit more flexibility on the attack than you would have normally. Another one, reserve units. We got these units upside down. The French also have a couple. Those are their old guard up there. These are things you can't move without paying some sort of penalty. And in the case of the Allies, you actually can't even, well, you can move them. You can't use them effectively. In the Allies' case, you actually can't choose to use them unless certain circumstances come into play. With the French, they can throw the guard in at any time. They just have to pay some morale. Yeah, there's another thing we got in this one. They tacked on army morale to the game, which to me, this one was really attractive when I first looked at it. First of all, it's the only game I had at that point that had an army morale. You had the, yeah, I can tactically be winning here and winning here, but, when it comes down to it, an army has a breaking point. Due to losses, due to ground taken, whatever, that's got to be tracked. You can't just keep taking losses. And actually, it's the thing that I feel is kind of the most missing out of, say, Stonewall or well, not so much Stonewall with the U.S. Union having it, but say Terrible Swift Sword here. There's no real army morale. There's a point where an army breaks. And I feel like the Gamers games, their Civil War Brigade series and the Napoleonic Brigade series kind of cover this. Well, here's an attempt to put it into a very simple system. We'll touch on it in a moment. But in terms of the reserve units, what happens here is they're not allowed to move closer to the enemy than a specific distance. For the French, it's 3 hexes. For the Allies, it's 4 hexes. So you can kind of push your reserves up. Now, if you end up inside that limit, the reserve unit can only move in a way that'll maintain or increase that distance. It's automatically activated in the following conditions. First of all, if the enemy puts it in a zone of control, it becomes an active unit. It's in play then. So you don't want to attack the enemy's reserves. That'll wake them up, and it's just a bad thing. There's no advantage to doing so, like there is, say, in Stonewall. So, if the army is demoralized, and each nation has its own army, this is a battle of 4 different nations, with the French taking on all comers, basically. If the national army is demoralized, all their reserves are activated immediately. But that's not necessarily something you want to have happen. It might be a valid tactic to demoralize your army before nightfall, get your reserves in play, and then you'll have a bigger army. But in general, you don't necessarily want your army demoralized. Okay. The French... Oh, so at the beginning of any movement phase, if the Allies have morale that's higher than their starting location, so like if the Austrians were up at 23, they can spend those excess points on a one-for-one basis to activate reserve units. Now, here's something annoying. The reserve unit's value is on the other side, and you have no idea what's on there. And I got this game, I've always pondered just marking it up with some damn numbers so that I know what's on the other side. And, you know, I mean, my copy, I've cut it in pieces, etc. My copy is not worth anything. I should just do this for the value of playing it. Of course, I don't play it very often, but all the same, I could just go with a scripto and put some numbers on all those reserve units, and it would make life a little easier for me. All right. One other thing. Whenever allied units of that army are eliminated or disrupted, and there's this special, another new rule, right? If either of those events happen, a reserve is activated to take its place. So as you take losses, you get reserves. Obviously, you don't want to take losses, but it happens. And it's kind of cool because you've got this steady stream coming from behind. For the French, however, all they do is they spend 4 morale, and they can activate their 2 old guard. Well, they could activate just one of them, but that would really be dumb. So, for a small cost, which they may want to do right from the beginning, they can throw the guard into the game. The old guard artillery is already in the game and available, and the young guard is all over the place and is in play. But the old guard is significantly better, I believe, in 9 strength. No, 7. The artillery is the 9. And that's kind of potent. A couple other little things. There's a conditional Austrian reinforcement that can come in kind of at random on turns, 10 through 13. And if it doesn't, it'll come in on turn 17 at a different location. So yeah. The weather. Well, in this case, we have a little bit different weather. We have some rain. It's not snowing all battle. And we also have a couple of night turns, and there's some additional rules for that. During the rain, the combat strength of infantry is cut in half. Streams become rivers. Landgraben become streams. Landgraben are kind of these invisible things. Now, their base value, I think, is they don't do anything. Oh no, they have +1 movement point. So yeah, actually they do have an effect. And here, water has an effect. There's a lot of terrain in this game. Eylau was, you know, basically an empty plain filled with snow. A few forests, some slopes and stuff. Well, this one has a lot of stuff. It has these sloping, kind of gullies going through it and stuff. So we're going to see a lot of effects to some of these. They're mainly defensively, they're doublers. But there's different costs for movement. And there's also problems getting the artillery over the rivers. And well, the river is impassable, but getting them over the streams and getting even over the Landgraben, they have to go over the bridges. So that's kind of an interesting little, we got a little bit more difficulty moving around here. Okay, and during night, one new additional rule. Not only is no combat happening, but you're allowed to withdraw from enemy zones of control. You weren't in Eylau. So here you can pull out of battle and reposition yourself and come morning. You also see there's 2 night turns. The scale of the time in this game is a little different. It's stretched out a little bit more, I guess. Allies. When they fight with multiple nationalities in the same battle, they get a column shift against them on the attack. It's a bad thing. A column shift's pretty hefty, so you'll generally keep units together. Now, everything from the other game, the fresh troop bonus, the divisional integrity, all that stuff, that's all gone. You don't have any advantages here. So, it might be a little harder to pull off attacks. You're also going to be using that combat table straight up. No die rolls to see, did it switch sides? Did everybody get eliminated? Alright, what about that morale table? Got a lot of points here. What happens? How do they disappear? How do they come back? Well, units that are eliminated drop the morale by 2. If a unit advances, it raises that army's morale level by 1. Okay, now there's a reason. You know, before, the defender would never advance, usually, because they don't want to get pinned into combat. Now there's a reason for them to. It ups your morale. And there's all the more reason to push attacks, etc., because it's going to help your morale. If an army is demoralized, all its reserves are activated. We have that. When an army is demoralized, though, its units may never advance after combat, and the effective combat ratio is shifted for attacking is shifted one column to the left. So you really don't want to be fighting while you're demoralized. You want to get out of combat. Now, at the end of the 6th and 16th turn, the Allies go back to their game start level, -1 for each permanently eliminated unit, i.e., as night falls. For the French, however, they get reset to 50 -1 for each eliminated unit. Ow. Alright. Now there's another thing. Disruption. Units aren't always killed. If cav or infantry that aren't surrounded by enemy units or enemy zones of control are eliminated, they're only disrupted. It's unrealistic to consider that an entire unit would be destroyed or captured usually. So here, they're going to go into this disrupted unit box where they can come back from it. If they are surrounded, however, or if the army is demoralized, in which case they'll just keep running, they're not going to be reformed, they are permanently eliminated and can't come back to play. The disrupted units come back on the map at the end of the day, adjacent to units of the same nationality, and they can't be closer than 2 nor further than 6 hexes away from the enemy. If no proper nationality units are available for the distance criteria, you can use any allied units. The French Guard units, when they come back... Oh, no, this... Yeah, wait. During the ensuing night game... Yeah, at night, the French Guard have to go back into reserve. So you got to spend that cost to bring them back into play every day that you want them. So you may not want them on the first day of the game because, you know, it's 8 points for... Yeah, what? You know? You probably aren't going to need them on the first day, but maybe on the third day you will need them. And you have 50 points then, so the 8 points is less important. How do you win? Well, you get points for permanent elimination of combat units. 1 for each strength point of infantry, and 2 for each cav or artillery. With no points going for the French garrison units, the 0 movement point units. What else do we have? Okay, Allies get 25 points per hex for holding. There's 3 central hexes around this Westphalian unit here. At the end of a French player turn, and that's these 3 hexes. I gotta be careful because the map's gonna pooch. This is one of those few games that I would actually consider putting plexiglass on top of, not because I want to protect it, but because I think I got some water on it and it's popping up annoyingly. On the other hand, plexiglass pops up annoyingly too. If the Allies prolong the game into the 3rd day and fail to achieve a decisive victory, the French get a 55-point bonus. Okay. And then we've got kind of a situation here. 55 points is enough to swing any non-decisive Allied victory into a loss. So you better be sure what you're doing if you're going to push it to 3 days. Okay. Well, what's up with that 3 days? I didn't say anything about that, did I? I must have missed a few things here. I'm going to have to look through the rules a little bit more and come back. Ah, yes, that's pretty easy, actually. At the end of every day, the Allies have the chance to declare the game over. And so if they can win it in the first day, they can just call it over at that point. Now, there was something I wanted to look at about... I don't remember what. Oh yeah, the rain again. Combat strength of infantry is cut in half. Yeah, why infantry only? I don't know. I don't know how much of an effect that has because it's on both sides. It's attack and defense. So it makes cav stronger, etc. But it doesn't really do much, I think, to the overall balance outside of making the special arms a little bit stronger. All right, I'm going to load this up. It's really a separate intro to Dresden as it stands. And we'll start playing.